Roger H. Grace from Roger Grace Associates will be moderating this session, and he's going to start off with a brief introduction overview. Roger.
Thank you, Ira, for the opportunity to be here today. Just a little bit of background here. I recently joined the MEPTech Advisory Board. I've known Ira for many, many years. And when he asked me to join, I come from a sensor background and MEMS background, and I encouraged him to consider bringing sensors and MEMS into this program. So he was kind enough to say yes, and I went out and searched my Rolodex, quote unquote, for people that I felt could make a major contribution to this program today. And I wanted to thank my speakers for agreeing to doing this and sharing their incredible knowledge with all of you that are out there. As Ira had mentioned, I'll be presenting some introductory comments to overview the four presentations. And I'll be up there for about 10 minutes, and then we'll start in with each of the presenters. And each of the presenters will have about 23 minutes to make their presentation after a couple minutes of introduction to them from me. And then there'll be a 5-minute Q&A period associated with their presentation. So unless there's any other housekeeping comments to make before we move forward from you, Ira, I'd like to get started with this presentation.
Go for it, Roger.
Okay, next slide, please, Ira. So very briefly here, Ira showed this quickly at the very beginning. So what I attempted to do, and you're going to see this in an upcoming slide, is to look at various kinds of sensors. And although we have a great deal of focus on MEMS as a result of what Nick and Doug will be doing, we're going to go into what I call the new platforms, which are printed flexible and functional fabric sensors, which I am very much involved with, and will be doing a conference at Sensors Expo later on this year for. And that's where our friends Patricia Beck and Sai Srinivas will be addressing the audience. So you're going to see a broad spectrum of sensors and the challenges that these sensor modalities have from a packaging and test point of view. Next slide. So the objective here is to give people in the audience, especially those that are not really well-versed or experienced in the sensor world, an understanding of what's going on in the sensor world from a packaging and testing point of view, and also an interconnection point of view. And I think it's really important, if you've been on the previous presentations, to see that there are a lot of similarities that you're going to see with the comments that are going to be made, especially from Doug Sparks and Nick, on integrating MEMS devices. But the thing that's going to be really interesting here is, especially in Nick's presentation, the fact that they're going to have to work in some very nasty environments. And that's where Nick is the master of nasty environments. Nick, that's your new nomen, master of nasty environments. Next slide, please. So my organization, Roger Grace Associates, was founded 40 years ago. We had our 40th anniversary party at Sensors Converge last year. And we work in two major areas. We work primarily in market research, where we do custom market research. And you can see the items that we do in market research. And then we do integrated marketing communications, which I call iMarcom, which is promotion, public relations, and positioning. And we tend to work with companies that have very innovative technologies, and especially in the sensors space. Next. You're going to see the word commercialization used a lot, and this is a functional block diagram that I was able to put together with the help of a lot of my friends in the industry. And you see how a product comes to market. So the definition of commercialization is the process or cycle of introducing a new product or production method to the market. And my organization is involved in the areas that are in red, and basically market research and promotion. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, there are different sensor modalities, and I've put together this slide, which I call the innovation slide. And what we see here is the standard management of technology innovation life cycle. And we've done an innovation life cycle here for 4 different modalities. And the first modality you can see to the far left is discrete electromechanical. And these sensors are things like LVDTs, which are sensors that have coils and cores, and because of, let's say, a movement, the coil stays stationary and the core moves, or vice versa. And that change in the flux density of the system gives you an indication of displacement. So this was the early way of doing sensors. Way back in 1955, and you're going to see this coming up in another slide, the first intro into MEMS was created through some work at Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey. That was 70 years ago. And right now, we're basically at the 3rd phase of the MEMS cycle in the maturity phase. And we're still on the linear portion of the curve, moving quickly into flattening out. You'll hear from our speakers on printed flexible sensors, which I consider to be the new sensor modality, and functional fabric sensors. And these are very, very important, especially in the areas of wearables, which are a very fast-growing area of technology. Next slide, please. Now, the thing that's important here is what we think about these, and I've written several papers on the concept of sensors as a system solution. And as you can see under the block diagram up and top, packaging and interconnects is an integral part of the overall solution. And the thing that's really, really important, and was brought out by several of the presenters, was that it's important to realize that the sensor doesn't work by itself. It has to work with a number of other things, especially the signal conditioning. And what's been happening in this industry is that we've been using chiplets before they were called chiplets. People would have ASICs, which would provide all of the functionality you see in that second yellow diagram. And then they would have individual ICs, and then all that would be on some kind of a substrate carrier, and then all of that would go into a packaging. And the thing that was really important here, that early on in, I think, the first presentation that we had, that the comment was made that we need to bring in the design team for the packaging at the very, very front end. We can't let packaging be an afterthought. It has to be integral to the overall design. And you can see all of those design principles, which are the foundations, have to be brought in phase 1. And I call it the pizza party, where everybody comes and gets together and drinks Coca-Cola and has pizza, and the people in packaging and tests have their say in the overall design. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a sense of how long it takes to commercialize a MEMS device. And my colleague, Steve Walsh from the University of New Mexico, and I put this together many, many years ago. The average for 12 different kinds of MEMS devices is 30 years. And in the early phases here, in those green phases, when you're doing your design and development and moving into product evolution, you really need to start thinking about packaging. You can't really think about it from a cost reduction point of view. It has to be part of the original design, because reducing costs as an afterthought is a much more expensive approach than doing it early on, and the time to market is increased as well. Next slide. I thought of this as a proper thing, considering that it's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock here in the West, and people have had their eggs for breakfast. But when you think of an egg, and we all know the beautiful, humble egg, and you think of MEMS packaging and packaging for sensors in general, there are an incredible number of attributes that the humble egg has. And there they are. I mean, I'm not going to go through them line item for line item, but there's an egg, and it's in my little ceramic egg holder. And when you think of it, and the most important one here is the one media compatible. When you want it to be boiled, it stays inside and it doesn't get destroyed. And when you want it to be in your scramble, you break the shell and it goes into your scramble. The thing that's really important here is that it's such a beautiful, simple thing. And when you think about MEMS packaging, I want you to think about the egg. The egg is the ultimate quintessential egg package. Next. So here's a lot of words, and I'm not going to spend the small number of minutes I have to complete this. But the thing that's important here, and I like to start it off with somewhat of a joke here, and that is Rodney Dangerfield, and I get no respect. And that's basically what's happened in MEMS packaging. I've been in the MEMS and sensor packaging business for 40 years, and packaging is an afterthought. And this event hopefully will raise the awareness level of people out there in the marketplace to consider it as an integral part of the solution and to give it respect, and the respect that it needs. The other thing that's really interesting is I was doing some research last night to prepare for today, and my dear friend, God rest his soul, Joe Brown, wrote an article in Small Times magazine 15 years ago, and he quoted the fact that the cost of packaging and testing, and I'm sure Doug will talk about this, can be from 10 to 70% of the total cost. And if you look at what Nick's going to talk about, Nick falls into the packaging and testing being at the very, very, high end of that number. The other thing, in kind of getting to the conclusions here, is that going through the last 6 or 7 speakers, there is an incredible amount of value and experience and know-how in what's going on in the IC industry. The IC industry has benefited immensely from a lot of the advances in the MEMS and sensors industry. And based on some commentary that was made by Chip Spengler, who was one of the kind people to help me put this together, he said that, and I'm kind of quoting him here, that the IC industry was foreshadowed, that's his word, from the early developments of sensor packaging and strategies. And this was a product that Chip did at Ford Microelectronics using through-hole silicon vias in the Isaac airbag accelerometer, which happened in the early to mid 1990s. So keep that in mind, that there's the MEMS industry has contributed significantly as well to the packaging and testing concept. Last slide. So I think the most important thing is here, again, bringing packaging and testing activities and concepts into the early phase of the design cycle, and looking to the integrated circuit business to learn from a lot of the money that's been invested there. You know, the MEMS business is 1/30 of the size of the IC business. And I kind of like my friend George Santayana's comment in his book, The Life of Reason. Those who don't remember the past are condemned to relive it. Let's benefit from our friends and our big brothers at the semi business and help them help us. The other thing is, I think that we need, and Ira and I are going to talk more about this, the concept of standards through key organizations. And we've heard a little bit about this earlier. And I believe that SEMI and MSIG, INEMI, and NIST are the key people that need to be more involved with helping us develop standards and testing mechanisms for these. And finally, hats off to MEPTEC and IRA and company to put together this forum to talk about interconnectivity, packaging, and testing. We need more good things like this by more good people like my co-presenters. And then finally, integrate this into more articles. I hope the people that are either presenting or listening here being motivated to write some articles on this topic. Next slide. And some acknowledgement here. These are my friends and colleagues who were kind enough to spend a great deal of time helping me get some input and some history into this presentation. Each of these people, looking at Joe Mallon, my dear friend Joe from Foxborough, from Nova Sensor, has spent 55 years in this business. Joe Giacchino, Ford and Michigan, 50 years. Gene Burke, Foxborough ICT with me, 50 years. Richie Payne, Analog Devices, 40 years. Chip Spengler, Ford Microelectronics. All these people, thank you very much. And finally, boom, thank you all. So if anybody has any questions, we need to move on. There's my email. You can send that to me. If you want to hear more about the printed flexible, we're doing a big program at Sensors Expo, and some of the speakers, Doug will be speaking there, and also Nancy, Patricia Beck will be speaking there. So come, go to the website, sensorsexpo.com, go to my website. Thank you all. And thank you, Ira, for the opportunity to make the presentation.
I want to also thank Adventest, who's received the highest customer satisfaction surveys, ranking as the #1 large supplier of semiconductor equipment in 2022 from Tech Insights. Also would like to thank Omcor and Cadence. Collectively, their sponsorship has enabled us to produce this event and make it available to everybody free. So I want to thank them once again. And when you have an opportunity, please thank them. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone here for participating. We will have the slides up next week. YouTube videos, the first 2 days are up. The remaining ones will be up by next week. So I want to thank everybody and wish you a good rest of your day and look forward to seeing you at a future MEPTEC event. Thank you.